Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we try to, cut through the noise and give you the stuff you really need to know. Today, we're looking at source material about something that, well, it trips up a lot of poker players, getting unstuck from just breaking even. And we're not just talking small tweaks here. The material suggests it's about a huge, almost fundamental shift in mindset, and it all centers on bluffing. Our mission today is to dig into why the usual approach fails so many players and how making bluffing mandatory, not just an option, might be the key to actually becoming a profitable player, a crusher.
Yeah, this is really crucial because you see players who technically they get it. They understand odds, position, basic strategy, but they just can't seem to make consistent money. And the sources we've looked at really hone in on this perception of bluffing. They treat it like a special occasion play, something you do only when everything lines up perfectly. So we're going to break down why that view is, well, strategically damaging and how committing to mandatory balanced bluffing actually boosts your overall expected value, your EV.
Okay, let's get into that. So if you're listening and you're stuck around break even, chances are you're seeing bluffing as this optional extra. Just waiting for that perfect river card, that specific opponent reaction, and if it doesn't happen, you just check it down. What's the immediate mental switch the sources say is needed?
It's a big one. You basically have to stop asking, is this a good spot to bluff? Just delete that question. Instead, the question has to become, okay, in this situation, what are my bluffs? Not if, but what. Bluffing isn't just, something extra you sprinkle in. It needs to be seen as a fundamental part of your strategy in every relevant spot.
Why mandatory? I mean, if I flop the nuts, surely my profit comes from that hand, right? Why does what I do with air matter so much? What's the direct link the material draws between how often I bluff and how much I win with my monsters?
See, that's the core connection. It's absolutely essential. If you don't bluff enough, you actually sabotage the profitability of your good hands. Think of your bluffs like the marketing budget for your value hands. Seriously, if you never advertise that, you could have nothing.
If you only bet when you have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then opponents learn really fast. They just fold every time you make a decent-sized bet. Unless they have a monster, too.
Yeah.
They adjust. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it, but they adapt to how tight they think you are.
Yeah.
So if they believe you only bet strong, they fold all their medium strength stuff, and your value bets win the minimum, your EV tank.
Right. So maximizing profit from my best hands, my nut hands, actually depends entirely on how well and how often I play the complete bottom of my range. The air, the busted draws, those become my bluffs.
That's it. It's a whole system. Every single bet you make, even with total air, is really an investment. It's designed to make your opponent call more often later or in future hands. When you actually do have it, if you're transparent, your profits just dry up.
Okay, this leads nicely into this sort of psychological trap the sources mention. They call it the secret wish of all break-even players. This kind of fantasy poker world where somehow our opponents are supposed to call all our value bets and fold to all our bluffs at the same time.
Oh, yeah, the dream scenario, right?
Yeah.
It's completely impossible, and we need to just, toss that idea out straight away. It kills good strategy. You just can't have it both ways.
Right.
Your opponent can't be calling you down light often enough for your value hands to get massive payouts. And be folding often enough for every single bluff you run to get through uncontested. It just doesn't work mathematically against anyone who's paying attention.
You mentioned earlier that theoretically our bluffs should probably just break even overall, but hang on, if I'm already struggling just breaking even, isn't putting chips in on a play that's only supposed to break even, isn't that kind of scary? Why would I do that?
That's a really fair question. And it hits on moving from short-term thinking, like, did this one bluff work, to a much longer-term strategic view. Think of that break-even bluff like maybe an insurance payment. Or, like that marketing spend we talked about. You spend the cost of the bluff, sometimes losing it when you get called, to guarantee the future health and profitability of your entire range. And the key insight is this. When your bluff gets called, it's not just, oops, I lost. It's actually the investment paying off in a weird way. It proves to your opponent, see, I do bluff sometimes. And that forces them to call you wider next time.
Okay. So they have to respect your bets more.
Exactly. And that wider calling range is precisely what gets you paid off when you finally make that full house.
That's a powerful reframe. A call bluff isn't just a loss, it's like prepaid future value.
Yeah.
But, okay, this brings us to probably the biggest pushback you hear, right? The player who says, yeah, but my opponents, they never fold, especially on the river. Bluffing them is just setting money on fire.
Right. And that statement almost always like a big red flag. It usually points to a mistake you're making earlier in the hand. not about your opponents being psychic calling stations. I mean, think about it. Opponents have to fold sometimes. Pre-flop, flop, turn, river, somewhere. If they called every bet down to the river with just, like, queen high,
They'd go broke incredibly fast.
instantly,
Well,
against any decent player pool, it's just not sustainable. So if you genuinely feel like nobody ever folds to your river bets, it very often means something went wrong on the flop or turn. And usually, it's your bet sizing.
Betting too big earlier on.
That's the most common one, yeah. If you, say, bomb the flop with a pot-sized bet,
You just blow all their weaker hands and draws out of the water immediately.
right, you force them to fold everything marginal right there. So by the time you get to the river, the only hands they can have are pretty strong ones that were worth continuing with.
So their range is already super narrow and strong because of your earlier aggression.
Exactly.
yeah.
They've already ditched the hands that would have folded on the river. You've accidentally destroyed your own bluffing opportunities later on.
Okay, so the goal isn't just bluff more. It's about balancing everything. Your bluff frequency, your value frequency, and your bet sizing on all streets. You need to play in a way that keeps the opponent's range wide enough and hopefully weak enough in spots so that folding is still a very real possibility for them on the turn and river.
Precisely. It's all about managing their range throughout the hand. That's the constant battle. If you make them fold too much too early,
You get no action when you're strong.
and you have zero fold equity when you're weak later on, you lose both ways.
Okay, let's talk implementation then. Because shifting to this mandatory bluffing idea, it definitely feels unnatural, especially if you're trying to protect a break-even bankroll. How do you actually start doing it? How do you force yourself to look at a hand, maybe one with a tiny bit of showdown value, like bottom pair, and ask, could this be a bluff?
Yet this is where the work comes in. This is what separates, the passive players from the ones who actually crush the games. If you only bet your obvious value hands the sets, the flushes your range, it's just crystal clear to anyone paying attention. You're capped. You're easy to play against. You have to actively hunt for hands that are, frankly, pretty bad to take to showdown, but have other properties that make them great bluff candidates. What kind of properties? Often it's about blockers. Hands that contain cards that make it less likely your opponent has the nuts, or maybe hands with backdoor draws that didn't get there but let you represent the draw that did complete. By folding those types of hands into your betting range aggressively, you put opponents in really horrible spots. Spots where calling feels risky, but folding feels weak. That's where the money is.
So for someone listening right now wanting to study this, wanting some practical steps, where should they focus their energy to find these new mandatory bluffs?
Okay, first I'd say look for spots where you notice the general player pool is generally weak at bluffing. Maybe specific board textures, like really disconnected boards.
Like King 7 Deuce Rainbow.
Yeah, or maybe when a scare card hits the turn, like an ace or a king, that doesn't really fit the hands you'd normally play that way for value, but you can credibly represent it. Those are often spots where people overfold. Hit those hard. Second, definitely use the tools available. Poker software, solvers, analyzing your own hand histories is huge. Look for hands you checked back or folded that had very little chance of winning at showdown, but maybe block some key strong hands your opponent could have.
Like having the ace of spades when the flush draw bricks, blocking the nut flush.
Exactly like that. Or maybe a busted gut shot straight draw that includes a key card. Those hands often make fantastic, low-risk, high-reward bluffs that people miss.
In doing all this work, finding these spots, pulling the trigger, it leads directly to improving something specific in your results, something trackers call the red line. Can you explain what the red line is and why boosting it is so linked to becoming profitable?
Sure. So your tracking software usually shows two main lines for your winnings, the blue line and the red line. The blue line is your showdown winnings pots you won when you had to show your cards.
Okay.
The red line is your non-showdown winnings. Basically, all the pots you win when everybody else folds before the river or folds on the river to your bet. You win without having to show.
So it measures how often you're successfully pushing people off pots, your fold equity, basically.
Precisely. When your red line goes up, it means you're applying pressure effectively, you're bluffing well, you're making people fold hands that might have even beaten you sometimes. And here's the critical link back to value betting. Boosting your red line through mandatory and well-chosen bluffs shows your opponents you're capable of firing barrels with air.
Right, you're establishing that threat.
Yeah. And because they know you can be bluffing, they're forced to call your bets more often overall, even when they're suspicious, just to stop you from running them over completely.
And that increased calling frequency from them. That's what makes your blue line go up, because now they're paying off your big value hands more often.
You got it. The red line creates the fertile ground for the blue line to grow. You need that non-showdown aggression, the red line, to ensure you get maximum value when you finally make your monsters, the blue line. If your red line is flat, or worse, trending down, it's a huge sign you're likely too passive, too predictable. And you're definitely leaving money on the table, both when you bluff and when you have the nuts.
Okay, so let's wrap this deep dive up. The core message from the material seems incredibly clear. Moving from break-even to genuinely winning at poker requires this fundamental shift. You have to start treating bluffing like some risky occasional tactic you try when you feel lucky. It needs to become a core, mandatory, systematic part of how you play. It's an investment.
It really is. It's an investment in the future profitability of every strong hand you'll ever make. So maybe the final thought to leave people with is this. If you start truly believing that every time one of your bluffs gets called, it's not simply a loss, but it's actually a down payment that increases the future expected value of your monster hands. How does that fundamental belief change the way you look for, select, and execute those bluffs that you now know are mandatory? Think about shifting your focus from just this pot right now to the long-term profit engine of your entire strategy.